I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Kerry Dawson. I currently work on contract as the Education Coordinator for the Comox Valley Conservation Strategy and own and operate Comox Academic Tutoring, where I tutor kids in math, science, and life. I'm not here speaking on behalf of anyone other than myself. I began my career about 25 years ago working as a biologist for BC Parks, where I was employed to engage children and families in learning about the importance of our natural heritage, something our provincial and federal governments used to think was important. For nearly 10 years, I also worked as an ecotourism guide on the BC mainland coast, taking people to view grizzly and black bears in the wild. My clients were mostly foreigners who came to Canada, primarily to see what they could not see anywhere else in the world, real wild nature on a grand scale. I'd like to tell you about a client I remember in particular, a man who had come to Canada with a childhood dream. A dream to see a real live grizzly bear catch a salmon in a real wild Canadian salmon river. He told me that as a child, Canada had been a mythical place to him, a place where vast forests still stood guard over rugged coastlines and wild rivers still ran fresh and clean, and he knew from a young age that he would come here one day and see it for himself. One rainy day, when that man was 37 years old, I took him and his childhood dream and I placed them on a viewing platform in the estuary of a wild BC salmon river. And within 10 minutes, the grizzly bear that he had dreamed all his life about came out of the woods, stopped a moment to stand and scratch her back on a tree, and wandered over to a riffle in the river right in front of us, where the salmon were pooling. She swatted at the water with her powerful paw, but came up empty. She then charged into the water, chasing the fish to and fro, but again was unsuccessful. She sat on the bank a few moments before 3 smaller bears came out of the bush and wandered over to her side. They all sat there in a line, staring longingly at the fish. Then suddenly, Mama stood up as if a new idea had struck her. She waded slowly into the middle of the river and then stood absolutely still, unmoving in the ice-cold water while her cubs wrestled and played on the bank of the estuary. Suddenly, her paw sprung sideways, powered by enormous muscles on her back. In a flurry of water and flying silver scales, the bear had a fish. She climbed from the river and laid down in the grass right in front of her cubs and started to tear at the salmon. I looked over at that moment at my client, just as he crumpled to the ground. Overcome with emotion, this grown man was weeping, great tears rolling down his face, bigger than the raindrops outside. When he finally regained his composure, he said to me, "You are the luckiest person in the world. To be able to witness this magic and beauty every day, do you know what you have here?" And I said to him, "Yes, I do know." But it made me think that day that sadly, many Canadians don't know what we have here. Most Canadians have grown up in cities and know nothing of the immeasurable value of our intact wilderness, of the value of having wild salmon and grizzly bears and wild rivers and wilderness coastlines. This is the heart of Canada. This is what makes our nation great. And I urge all of you listening to me here today to go on a tour like this and sit quietly beside a wild river near an estuary for a day, watching grizzly bears live their lives. Because human beings are not the only animals living on this land, and we don't own this land. We share it with a wealth of other creatures, both great and small. But if we are not careful, we will be the last and only animals living here in a desolate wasteland of our own making. I've learned a lot about bears. I know that not all bears are as patient as the one I just described. I know that bears learn, that they get better at things with experience as we do. I know that bears all have individual personalities, just like any other animals do. I know that all bears fish in their own way, in their own favorite spot, some better than others. I once knew a young, foolish grizzly bear whose idea of fishing was to belly flop off a high bank, smack into a deep pool of salmon. After each belly flop, he would snorkel about the pool with just his ears peeking above the water, searching for any fish he'd managed to stun into submission. Then he would scamper up the bank and repeat the process, over and over and over again. I never once saw him catch a fish this way, but he kept on trying for days. I know that bears love to play and are curious and intelligent. I've seen bears strategize, use tools, and even babysit. I know that bears can also suffer incredible pain. I know that bears on our coast need salmon to survive. Without salmon, the bears go hungry, as do the orcas, the porpoises, the wolves, the seals, the sea lions, otters, mink, eagles, ravens, and so many other species. Salmon are the key to the coastal food web. They are the glue that keeps this complex and fragile ecosystem functioning. I also know that oil and salmon don't mix. The ecotourism industry and tourism in general is worth billions to our economy. Our coastline is a national, a global treasure. It took thousands of years to become what it is today. We cannot let it be destroyed by greed in the blink of an eye. Some things are more valuable than money and can never be replaced. We've seen what's happened to the ocean all around Japan after its recent tragedy. It has become a radioactive cesspool. No one would dream of eating salmon or any seafood taken from those waters now. We can't risk that kind of disaster here. Oceans are not without their own limits. There are already huge dead zones in our oceans caused by our land-based pollution, as well as islands of plastic in the sea that cover vast areas, some over 700,000 square kilometers. You don't have to be a scientist to know that something is very, very wrong with this picture. We live on the edge of the Pacific Ring of Fire, one of the most tectonically active subduction zones in the world. The earthquake that brought such tragedy and horror to Japan will happen here, sooner than later. The earth will shake, mountains will move, and big waves will come. And little pipes will be snapped and broken like twigs under a grizzly's paw. Before the pipeline even reaches its destination at the coast, it has the added potential to damage or destroy many of the great rivers and streams all across this province, and threaten the livelihood of the people and creatures that depend on them. Climate change is bringing increasingly volatile and unpredictable weather to our coast, as the brutal storm just a few weeks ago attests. Throw into that a few thousand oil supertankers with fallible human captains, and you've got a certain prescription for black water, oil-covered rocks, birds, seals, wolves, and bears, a poisoned land, a destroyed legacy, something that can never be fixed, or at least not for a very long time. The recent Concordia cruise ship disaster happened in far less dangerous waters, while the sinking of our very own Queen of the North occurred right on one of the proposed tanker routes. With Enbridge's extensive spill record, I have no doubt that if their tankers are allowed to navigate around places with names like Calamity Bay, then calamity is what you'll get. This pipeline must not be built. It makes no sense. It is nothing but greed that fuels these pipe dreams. Would you let your children play Russian roulette with a loaded revolver in exchange for making a few of your friends wealthy? Because that's exactly what you're preparing to do if this insane project is approved. Disasters that will despoil the bounty and abundance of our world-envied coastline will happen, and with them, our salmon, our orcas, our grizzly bears, birds, the entire coastal environment will crumble, and so too will the future for British Columbians and Canadians. As an ecologist, I assure you that our insistence on clinging to the untenable idea of a human-created economic system based on endless growth is an absolute biological impossibility. Leading scientists all over the world agree our relentless pursuit of growth and material wealth, along with our continuing reliance on fossil fuels, is destroying the Earth's capacity to provide us with the life-giving ecosystems we rely on for air, water, and food. It is time to take the difficult steps and face the coming downturn in oil and begin to plan our new energy strategy now. Canada was once a respected world leader in environmental policy and forward-thinking technologies. Canada should be leading the way on our global path to a more sustainable energy future, not investing in more dinosaur technology. We need to embrace a new vision now, and that vision does not include an oil pipeline across our province and supertankers on our coast. Thank you.